My name is Rasha Kashan. Rasha means a baby deer in Arabic. I feel really privileged to stand before you all and share my personal experience with you. I am the editor of Diversity in BBC Arabic, and I was the first female Sudanese journalist to join the service. I also happen to be blind and a mom, raising my 12-year-old son on my own. The word impossible is not in my vocabulary, but the word challenge is. Like many of you in this room, my biggest challenge was not accepting my disability, but trying to change other people's perceptions of it. I remember the late Stephen Hawking saying about his disability, it was important not to be disabled in spirit as well as physically. That is indeed how I tried to live my life. I was born in Oxford, in England, to a father who traveled all the way from Sudan to train as a surgeon in the home of orthopedics. I was the second child of 3 siblings. At the time of my birth, my dad was counting the days to return back home and serve his country. My mom is an artist. She set up a little gallery in our home and sacrificed her career to raise my 2 brothers, sister, and me. I grew up in Sudan, lived an exceptional livelihood, and traveled with my family from the far west to the far east of the country. I was famous for being the only 4-year-old girl to wear glasses from such an early age. I still vividly remember my first trip to the opticians. My mom looked at me and said, "Rasha, you have such beautiful eyes. We need to frame them." Those words touched me then and continue to touch me now. I attended a state-run primary school. It was only when I was my teenage that I learned about my progressive condition. I was diagnosed with retinitis pigmentosa, a form of retina dystrophy that causes the light photoreceptors to die, leaving a black pigment on the back of the eye. I overheard my mom talking to a neighbor about my condition. I was shocked to know that it was not going to get any better. I remember the gut-wrenching disappointment that I felt when I realized that I would never be able to ride my bike again, as I was hoping, and gradually I will lose my sight until I become totally blind. At the age of 18, I decided to go to university to do journalism. And it was at the time that political tension was running high in Sudan, and that was disrupting tertiary education. I desperately wanted to study in the UK, but my dad was concerned that I might not be able to cope in a strange environment, as my vision has started to deteriorate rapidly at that point. So we reached a compromise. I will complete my first degree in Sudan and then move to the UK for my postgraduate studies. In fact, I ended up studying in 3 different universities in Sudan at the same time. This was for pragmatic reasons. The security forces kept shutting universities down one after another, and I needed to get a degree as soon as possible and leave for the UK. In the end, I graduated from 2 universities with 2 different degrees, one in journalism and the other mass communications. I came top of my year in both. In 1996, I traveled to the UK and began a new chapter in my life. On my way to London, I stopped off in Cairo and received the prestigious Ali and Mustafa Amin Award of Excellence for the top Arabic-speaking graduate of journalism. Once in London, I had a very clear about what I wanted to do next. To learn to live independently, perfect my English, acquire IT skills, get an MA, gain some practical journalism experience, and ultimately join the BBC Arabic service. I learned how to use the white cane for the first time in my life and immediately recognized how many doors it opened for me in the UK compared to the doors that it closed back home. I completed touch typing and computing courses and 2 MA, one in broadcast journalism and the other in broadcast journalism and bilingual translation, so sorry. My greatest fear is that I would turn up for an interview and the panel wouldn't recognize my journalistic skills, but rather they see my disability. Unfortunately, my fears became a reality. Every time I applied for a job, I immediately got shortlisted and invited for a job interview. But the minute I walked to the room with my white cane, I didn't get the job. Of course, no one ever told me that because of my disability. Because they were only too aware, they would have been sued. But it really knocked my confidence at the time and made me feel terribly frustrated. My message to employers then was, give me a chance, make a few minor adjustments to my working environment, and I will be an asset to your organization. Finally, after a lot of rejection and disappointments, I found an employer which recognized my journalistic credentials and for whom my disability became almost invisible, the BBC. I'm sure most of you in this room are familiar with the BBC, but just in case you aren't, it's the public service broadcaster in the UK, which is funded by a license fee. Its services include 9 national TV channels, 10 national radio stations, 40 radio stations, 40 radio local stations, extensive website, and increasing digital services. The BBC World Service, where BBC Arabic belong, broadcasts to 40 different countries and works in 40 languages. The BBC's mission is to enrich people's lives with programs and services that inform, educate, and entertain. And its vision is to be the most creative media organization in the world. Anyway, after not being successful for 2 occasions, I discovered that the BBC would actually allow me to do the test electronically rather than in writing, and would give me more time because of my disability. I just needed to ask, and I didn't know that was one of my rights. That made all the difference for me, and I finally got through to the interview stage. I still remember the moment that I got that call from the BBC, inviting me for an interview. It was incredibly exciting, and I said to myself, yes, this is my opportunity to shine and impress. I walked into the interview room with a recruitment officer, who then helped me to get seated. The 3-member panel welcomed me and introduced themselves and started asking questions. Everything was fine until I moved to the last question of the interview. And I was presented with a script and asked to read it as if I was in a studio. I freaked out and then tried to compose my emotions. Before the interview, I had been assured there was no written material will be part of the interview. The head of the panel immediately apologized. There was a brief silence, and I looked at the text, and actually I found it in a large, bold font. A little voice inside me told me to just try and read it. I visualized myself in a BBC studio presenting a program to the BBC Arabic audience and just got on with the job. 6 months later, I was in the hot seat doing just that for real, co-presenting a new flagship BBC Arabic program for millions of our younger listeners in the region. My experience with the BBC was different from any other employer. It enabled me to celebrate being a journalist, and colleagues have almost treated me like a VIP. It not only removed the minor practical barriers that were holding me back, it took away a major psychological obstacle, restored my confidence, and allowed me to focus on what I'm good at, my journalism. I was the first journalist with severe visual impairment to join BBC Arabic. As soon as I started, I had a needs assessment done by the BBC Access Services. It covered all access of my working life, from mobility to building safety, but the most significant part was assistive technology. Since starting at the BBC 14 years ago, I have been literally introduced to dozens of systems and applications, not only because of the BBC has changed what it uses, but also due to the progress of my condition. This has been daunting at times, but I have just accepted that what it is. It is what it is. I had gained strength in the fact that I had a great support network around me, with direct access to the top managers of each section. I have never been put under pressure to do a job in a certain way or use tools that I feel uncomfortable with. People with disability in the UK are also fortunate because there is a governmental scheme called Access to Work. It assesses the needs of employees with disabilities and provides funding for equipment, travel to work, and support workers as required. So, I now have a full-time personal assistant, the wonderful Khulud, who is showing you now the slides on the screen, who even travels with me when I go abroad on a duty trip. And also, I have cars that takes me to work and vice versa. During the first 2 years of my career with the BBC, I worked as a presenter, reporter, program maker, and a producer. And in my third year, I was made a senior journalist. 3 years later, I was appointed an editor, an achievement which is to this day I feel really proud of, especially at the time I had additional personal and work challenges in my life. Unfortunately, though, I was no longer able to present because of a new advanced computing system. This was a huge disappointment for me. Around the same time, my vision rapidly deteriorated, and I went back to my eye consultant, the last time I had a sight test, I was able to see up to the 5th row of the chart. I could only see 2 rows this time. The doctor tried every lighting adjustment in the room, but nothing worked. My retina dystrophy had advanced like an intruder. Even though I knew that this day would eventually come, I had been living in denial up until then. How could I cope with looking after my 5-year-old son if I was blind? Would I need to learn Braille? I was also filing for divorce at the time and moving house. Suddenly, I lost all my comfort zones at once, both at home and at work. But being the pragmatist that I am, I just knew that I had to keep moving forward. I was very lucky that the BBC supported me every step of the way. I also fortunate to have a living nanny at home so that my son and I could establish a new routine. I will tell you a little story. Around the time that I was appointed a program editor, my boss enrolled me into a coaching program. I started to communicate with my new coach by email. I sent him my CV, my job description, but didn't mention anything else. Then, the day of our first coaching session arrived. I walked into the room and said, "Hi, I'm Rasha." He looked at me in silence and then said, "Are you really? Sorry, I didn't realize." I said to him, "Didn't realize what? That I'm visually impaired?" He said, "Yes, and that you're a woman, and you are of a black origin." And I added, "and a single mom, and filing for divorce, and a Muslim." We both laughed. He said to me, you certainly tick all our diversity boxes, Rasha." This was the first time I realized being a bit different is actually something to celebrate. That coaching experience made me even more curious about diversity at the BBC. So, in 2016, I applied for a new leadership program that the BBC launched in order to find the top future leaders of the organization. My idea was to launch a new scheme for journalists with disabilities. Initially from the Arabic-speaking world, but then I wanted to roll it out to the rest of the 40 languages services. To my amazement and delight, I was selected to be one of the 30 future leaders to take part in an intensive 1-year development program. And I even had a small budget to help me during the planning phase of Aim High, the name that I chose for my scheme. So Aim High is the first disability scheme outside the UK. I'll just show you a little video of the promo that we compiled together for Aim High. It will have colleagues who are speaking in Arabic, but also in English. So don't worry if you can't speak, you can't understand Arabic, because at the end of it, you'll be able to figure out what the message was.
هذا المكان كان حلمي منذ أن قررت أن أدخل إلى عالم الصحافة. في عام 2011 أصبحت رئيس التحرير، وهذا هو نفس العام الذي فقدت فيه بصري. BBC ساندتني ودعمتني حتى أتمكن من التوائم مع ظروفي الجديدة.
The BBC has really helped me sort of delve into every part of journalism.
And that was actually the first time that I'd ever felt comfortable disclosing that I had a disability on a job application.
بعد حوالي 2 أو 3 سنوات من اكتشافي للمرض نجحت بالانضمام لقناة BBC.
I've only been here 6 months. I've written loads of articles, presented my own digital video.
لا تفكر مرتين، تقدم، تدرب، وانطلق.
This is a place for everyone.
Just jump in.
You can work for the BBC.
And the BBC can work for you.
Aim high, and you can make the BBC work for you.
You can make the BBC work for you.
أنا وصلت وأنت يمكنك الوصول. Aim high.
Thank you very much. So the people that you saw on the video, it was myself, of course, and then after that, there was Lucy with her guide dog, Olga, and Mahdi, my colleague in BBC Arabic, who's got MS, and Craig, who's got dyspraxia and dyslexia, and the last one is Alice, who's got complex disabilities and a user of a wheelchair. So after this promo and after the campaign that we have conducted in BBC Arabic, 300 people applied for Aim High, and 10 successful candidates were invited to travel from Algeria, Western Sahara, Sudan, Egypt, Yemen, and Iraq to join to do the training. The training program included sessions in essential BBC editorial and practical modules. It is one of my proudest achievements, utilizing my own personal experience to empower others. Let's have a quick look at where the BBC stands when it comes to disability. The BBC has always had a commitment for reflecting and representing diversity of the population. Our aim is to be the most diverse representative organization in the world. Just before I left London to come to the summit, the BBC Director General Tony Hall published the organization's final report for culture and inclusion, focusing on its ambitions for disabled staff. The report came after a series of recommendations, and it will change the way we work. Tony Hall said, quote, "We want to open up opportunities so they will be new to disability targets. They will help us to do just that. We are appointing a new disability-led, and we will be encouraging more disabled role models. So you see more prominent champions on all levels, and especially in leadership level." Now for a few stats in the UK. There are currently 13.3 million disabled people, 13.3 million disabled people. That's 1 in 5 people. 18% of the working adults are disabled, 18%. So how the BBC is doing? Around 21,000 people work for the BBC. Senator Harkin, in the last summit, you said you wanted to see the figures of disabled employees doubled. 4 years ago, we had 3.7% staff with disabilities. 2 years later, they increased to 5.3%. Today, over 2,000 employees at the BBC have disabilities. That's around 10.4%. I'll repeat again, 10.4% of the BBC staff have a form of disability. Out of this number, around 9.5% are in leadership positions. And that is almost triple the figures we had 4 years ago. And this is not the end of it, and this is not enough. The new target, which was announced last week by the Director General, was 12% for disability. We aspire to keep going until we actually match the population figures of 18% very soon. State of people with disabilities, they've written the people with determination. I was aware that the government of United Arab Emirates has decided to use more positive language to describe people with disabilities. I explained this to Ziad. The next day, we went to the bank with a friend, and he saw blatant discrimination. I made a point of using my white cane, even though I was with a friend. The cashier printed out some forms and asked my friend, "What's her name?" It's if I didn't exist. My son was the quickest to notice this. He said, "What?" The cashier ignored him and ignored me, and then continued to talk to my friend. "Surely she doesn't work, so this form is not important. Don't worry about it." By this time, I was feeling really frustrated. I stopped by saying, "Sorry, it's me who has this bank account, not my friend. You need to talk to me. And why did you assume I didn't work? Because I can't see? By the way, blind people can hear and understand as well as they can talk." When we walked out of the bank, my son was very despondent and said, "What's the point of calling the disabled people of determination then? It obviously didn't mean anything for me." And that was my son, by the way, saying. Our experience at that bank in Dubai illustrates that ignorance still exists, and we need to tackle it and at the grassroots level. Closer to home, there was recently outrage from some BBC viewers when a young TV presenter appeared on children's TV without using her prosthetic arm. Some parents found this offensive and were worried that it would shock their children. I believe that we need to build a culture that respects differences and treats disability with dignity and understanding. On employment level, people with disabilities are not sitting there waiting for somebody to do them a favor by employing them. We are extremely talented, incredibly reliable, and we are of all other employees, we're the ones who are willing to go the extra mile to show dedication and commitment. I believe that my aim high trainees who are from developing countries deserve the right to an education and work. But more than this, they deserve to live in a world without prejudice. For example, my blind trainee Ahmed in Cairo needs to have adapted traffic lights that will enable him to cross the road independently so that he doesn't have to pay somebody to help him cross the road. Haider in Baghdad has the right to have his own bank account and credit card, both of which he has been denied because he can't see. Ramadan, a postgraduate researcher, should be offered the job he deserves. Currently, he's asked to stay at home and is being paid a salary of less than $20 a month so that his employer can meet his mandatory disability quota. Sidi Mohammed in Algeria should be able to vote in the elections in a way that is accessible for him. Nahla should be able to marry the man she loves. At the moment, her family is concerned she is prone to be abused psychologically, and her husband may control her finances because of her disability. El Ghali in Western Sahara needs to find a job that matches his incredible skills and not to feel obliged to carry on with the marginal job he's doing at the moment. And finally, Walid needs to be introduced as the presenter, not as a blind presenter. Ladies and gentlemen, when all of my colleagues from Aim High have achieved their ambition, maybe I can retire as a journalist. As a journalist, I'm not that comfortable to be the story myself. Instead, I prefer telling other people's stories. But if it can help to change perceptions about disability and confront prejudice, then it has been worthwhile. I consider myself to be very lucky. I have had so many opportunities in life, perhaps even more so because of my disability. I dream of a day when it becomes the norm to see journalists with disabilities on our TV screens, not just in the UK, as it's the case now, but around the world. Thank you for listening.